Doha, once seen as untouchable, is now part of the battlefield. An Israeli strike has killed Hamas leaders and a Qatari officer, shaking Qatar's role as mediator. The attack reverberates across the Gulf, raising doubts over US security guarantees and fragile ceasefire talks. From Doha to Gaza, the question looms: can diplomacy still survive? In Doha, the shock is raw. Israel's airstrike on a residential building in the Qatari capital killed 5 Hamas members and a Qatari security officer, shattering the belief that the tiny Gulf state was safe. Qatar thought it was shielded by America's biggest airbase in the region, shielded by billions in defense deals signed during Donald Trump's red carpet visit just 4 months ago, shielded by its role as a mediator, hosting Hamas leaders, shuttling messages, taking risks in pursuit of peace. But none of that stopped Israeli warplanes. The language from Doha has been blistering. Qatar's Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, called the strike state terror and accused Benjamin Netanyahu of killing any hope for hostages or peace.
I was meeting one of the hostages' families the morning of the attack. They are counting on this mediation. They have no other hope for that. I think that what Netanyahu has done yesterday, he just killed any hope for those hostages.
For the United States, the optics are dire. A close ally, home to 10,000 US troops, was just hit by Washington's own partner Israel. Trump is said to be very unhappy, but unhappiness is not protection. And across the Gulf, America's allies are watching. For decades, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman and Qatar pivoted to Washington, signing trillions in deals under the assumption that US security guarantees were ironclad. That assumption now looks hollow. Analysts warn that the credibility gap is widening. H.I. Hellier of the Carnegie Endowment says Gulf states will be forced to consider new defenses and perhaps new patrons.
I think those nations will be wondering what they can do in order to deter future attacks. What sort of security architecture they need to now invest in instead of relying on a partner that hasn't been able to protect them even from one of its own allies.
The wider impact could be devastating for diplomacy. Qatar has not shut the door on mediation, but the airstrike has cast a shadow over every future attempt at dialogue. Other states, Egypt, Oman, even Saudi Arabia, may now think twice before stepping into the line of fire. And in the region, a belief long whispered has grown louder, that Israel's true aim is not negotiation, but sabotage. The question left hanging is, if America cannot protect its own allies from Israel, what remains of its credibility in the Middle East? For Israel, the strike in Doha may have eliminated key Hamas operatives, but the cost has been strategic. By expanding the battlefield beyond Gaza, Israel risks alienating allies it once quietly relied on. Qatar, long a mediator, is now accusing Israel of sabotage, while Gulf monarchies question whether Washington can rein in its closest Middle East partner. That doubt lands at the worst possible time for the United States. After years of urging Gulf states to deepen ties with Israel, Washington must now explain why its security umbrella could not protect Qatar, a host to the region's largest US airbase. The strike feeds into a growing narrative in Arab capitals that Israel's war has turned from self-defense into regional destabilization. Inside Gaza, meanwhile, Israel's military push continues. Vast swathes of the territory are destroyed, tens of thousands of civilians are dead, and yet Hamas clings on. Its fighters melt into the ruins, re-emerging in hit-and-run attacks that sap Israeli morale. And with hostages still held, Hamas ensures it retains leverage both inside and outside the Strip. The paradox is stark. The more Israel seeks total victory, the more it risks an endless war, one that weakens its own alliances abroad while feeding Hamas's claim of resistance at home. The strike in Doha was meant to show reach and resolve. Instead, it may be remembered as proof of limits, both to Israel's campaign against Hamas and to America's power to contain it. In the aftermath of Israel's strike in Doha, targeting senior Hamas officials, the group's leadership is signaling it will press ahead with ceasefire negotiations. According to a report in a Saudi daily, Ashaq al-Awsat, there is now broad agreement within Hamas to see the talks through, but only on terms that align with Palestinian demands. Those demands, the paper notes, center on 2 points: a complete end to the war and assurances that Israeli forces will fully withdraw from the Gaza Strip. For Hamas, these conditions are seen as the minimum threshold for any agreement to be presented as a political and strategic gain. The attack in Qatar briefly upended the negotiation process, casting uncertainty over whether the militant group would continue engaging with mediators. But sources cited by the paper say contacts are expected to be re-established in the coming days, once security conditions allow. That suggests that, despite the targeted strike, Hamas remains committed to using the talks as a political channel. The framework of mediation remains in the hands of Qatar and Egypt, who have been central to efforts at securing a truce and a possible exchange of hostages. With international pressure mounting, particularly from Washington and European capitals, the resumption of talks will be closely monitored. Whether Hamas can secure its stated demands is far from certain. Israel has repeatedly rejected calls for a full withdrawal and insists on maintaining security control in Gaza, even if some administrative powers are handed over to others. This gap between the two sides remains one of the main obstacles to progress. For now, Hamas appears to be signaling that it is still willing to return to the table, but under conditions that set the stage for another test of diplomacy in a war that has already defied resolution.